All right, good morning. I'm gonna call this meeting to order. We do have, board members present, minus one. We have guests and delegations. We do have, Mr. Chris Hill with the Fire Protection Association here, Chief Booth, Assistant Chief Ivy, have Alex Smith here with us, and then Chief Parsons. We do have a quorum present. We do have Chief Gunn attending us, on conference call, so he will be available for comment. Notice of this meeting was posted 3 weeks prior to this date. I think that brings us down to guests and delegations. So I think we'll refer that down to our guests and delegations into the new business. Approval of the agenda.
Motion.
Second.
All right, have a motion and second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, that brings us down to the minutes. The minutes were mailed out, I'm pretty sure a week ago, the copy that I have. over a week
Wednesday,
ago.
Thursday last week,
Yeah.
I think is when I sent them.
For review.
Motion approved.
Have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Are you opposed or voting for
He's opposed.
it? Okay. All right.
Are you even paying attention? That'd be no. He don't even know what he voted for.
Chief Gunn.
I voted aye.
Okay.
Do you know what you voted for?
Yes.
Well, I appreciate the raise. Thanks.
All right, that brings us down to the financial report.
Alright, again, I apologize for this being small, I've tried dividing it into 2 sheets, and it's a little bit better, but not a whole lot. I think next month I may try it on legal paper and make it big enough that we can all see. As far as revenues go, most everything's in line. Still having an occasional lag in our SNEAD checks coming in for our dispatch fees. We are sending them another invoice as a reminder. I think most of that is just the changes they've had in City Hall staff trying to get into a routine. I don't think that there's any intent. I think it's just gotten overlooked. So we will follow up with them. You notice that there was not a blockable payment, but it has since come in. So it will be posted with the January numbers. And then as far as expenses go, you'll see that our payroll looks substantially up. We were forecast for 3 pay periods in January, but with the first being on a Friday and a holiday, that pay period actually posted in December. So the January forecast number will drop back down to in line with the 2 pay period month, and the 3 pay period month became December. So that's why that looks like we are substantially high for 2 months in a row, but we should be back in line with a 2 pay period January. Further down, dues and subscriptions line, that payment posted a month ahead of where it was forecast, so that forecast January number will drop back down. All in all, we are still in line with the forecast adopted budget, and actually gonna, if things go as they are today, we will be a little bit under that deficient number that we had forecast. You got your operating balance, the number down there at the bottom as of last week when I pulled that off the bank statement. Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
No? Motion to approve?
Second.
A motion and second. Any other discussion on the financial statement? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Yes.
What do
I'm
you,
not opposed.
You got just a little bit of delay there, chief.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That brings us down to staff reports, the 2021 call statistic report.
Just to give you a, and that says 2021 cost statistics report, that should be 2020 year summary, kind of, just to give you an idea of what we did as far as dispatch operations. I'm not gonna go line through that, but 72,745, CAD events, calls for service that were put into the CAD system. That's an average of just under 200 per day, which is way up from what we used to do, as expected. When leads came on, we knew that was gonna be a big bump in our call stats, so we're pretty close on to what we had forecast with that consolidation number. And you can see line by line, I divided these out by department, so that you can see who's the busy and whatnot, just to give you an idea of what we do as far as dispatch operations. The other sheet, that's got the hours a day, I don't think it scanned in color, but that's just the verification that our noon to 10 p.m. is our busiest time of day, and that's when we try to staff 5 when at all possible, just to give us the capacity to do that. As far as 911 calls go per day, our average for the year was 106.6 911 calls per 24-hour cycle. 32,503 total 911 calls. Of that, 6,418 were landlines. So, just to give you an idea of what we do dispatch operations wise.
Any other comments on the statistics? All right.
Mark's folks are busy.
You know, I was just sitting there looking at that, and I thought, the closest next department to me is 10,000 calls away from what we answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that department, listen, I love that department. That department answers 10,000 calls last year. They have just as many officers on as I do,
Mm-hmm.
and cover about 650 per square miles less than I do. These are good. Thank you for making these for me. I'm gonna take these to the commission. I was talking to one of Aniana's officers today. We had a guy apply. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take your time here. We had a guy apply. He was asking questions. I was like, look, man, he wants to come from Birmingham PD. I said, we can't touch your pay. There's no way we can pay you what you're making. And so when I was talking to an Aniana officer today, and he told me what they start out at, I sent him a message that said, apply to OPD because they can pay you.
All right, that brings us down to the AAC report.
You've got those attached in your packets. Those are just for reference for
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Talking to my phone?
Apparently Brandon's Siri likes me. We ended up doing 4 months. We tried to do those quarterly. We ended up having to do 4 just from the way that our meetings fell. The December meeting was the week that my mother's health declined so drastically, so we had to bump it to January. So we had to do 4 months. We did a 4-month evaluation of these statistics in about an hour and 40 minutes, which was pretty impressive that we could roll through it that quickly. A lot of exemptions applied based off of, some to do with the pandemic, some to do with just call volume and turnaround time. Ambulances getting stuck on the wall waiting for beds at hospitals and things like that. So all in all, no fines assessed. They are hitting at or very close to their 90% mark that is required by the contract. And overall, the overarching purpose of the contract is being met. So there were no fines or anything assessed, and we will meet again in May.
All right, any other comments on the AAC report? All right, Blunt EMS.
Just, I had mentioned a couple, 3 months ago about some concerns with the way the dispatch contract is phrased and some gray areas that both entities are not on exactly the same page of what the expectations are. So I don't know if this is something that y'all wanna make a board committee out of, to go back through and shore up some defining these categories, or how y'all wanna handle that. But the first bullet point in Schedule A of that contract, it says, the district shall receive and process all emergency and non-emergency calls. Their version of receive and process is much more labor intensive than what I think we originally intended that contract to be. Meaning, follow-up phone calls and customer service related type things that they're wanting our dispatchers to do. And based off of those statistics I gave you earlier, we just don't really have time to do most of the time. So I would like some sort of guidance from the board as to exactly what some of these bullet points should mean, so that we can have a follow-up with the Blunt EMS folks and all get on the same page and shore up some of these, not necessarily disagreements, but gray spaces that cause some confusion.
Well, I can say that was not the intent when that was drafted, because I was involved in it from our side, and was in the meetings with Blunt EMS, but I'll throw that in, that the process did not involve customer service. That's not the original thought anyway.
All right, so I guess
I don't know if you want
We
to
can
go through all
establish
that
it.
in a full board work session, or a subcommittee, or how
Yeah,
y'all wanna do that.
what would be the pleasure of the board if we created a subcommittee to review that, sit with Neil, and then report back to the board?
I think that's what we need to do.
And I think most of that could probably be done virtually, of a phone call or two and some email exchanges of. And I don't think that would be necessarily a contract revision, it would just be maybe a appendix that we could add of some definitions. Is that the way that would?
Interpretation. Yeah.
Dean, would you be willing to sit on that?
Yeah. You know, I've got all the time in the world now.
Steve, would you be willing? And one more.
Steve Gunn, did you say you would?
Was that a yes, Gun? We lost you.
I'm sorry, I just got an update. I'm sorry, I
Chief
didn't
Gunn,
hear you.
Chief Gunn, would you be willing to sit on a review committee for the ambulance contract, just to get some clarification, and it's not a revision, just a review?
Yes, I would be glad to.
Okay, thank you.
Thought it sounded like him volunteering.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else with that?
That's it. I'll get
And-
those emails out later today and start that.
Okay, all right. Thank y'all very much for doing that. That brings us down to old business, the P25 radio system update.
Had about an hour and a half phone call with some of our folks from Mobilcom, Allcom, Motorola, whichever verbiage you want to use for that. Talking through a few little bullet point things of what our next steps would be. We have a draft of what our talk groups would be. That draft is a shared document between myself and Motorola at this point. As we shore up that draft, hopefully by this time next week, that draft will be in the hands of the systems administrator at Birmingham 911 to get approved and start getting that into their system. That contains 5 law enforcement talk groups, and the law enforcement set would have all the Homeland Security mutual aids and a department-specific private for all of the full-time departments. So currently, law enforcement has TAC 1 and TAC 2. This would give us TAC 1, TAC 2 equivalents plus 3 more. So a lot of space for expansion in the future.
And then a channel for each
And
individual
then a
agency.
private channel for each department. And on the fire side, there will be 3 primary fire talk paths, a dispatch frequency, a pair of operational frequencies, 4 operational frequencies that would be equivalent to what they're currently using as the red, white, and blue, like fireground. But I've got these divided as a north, south, east, and west. So basically 4 quadrants of the county that we can divide up, but everybody would have all of these. So if Aniana goes to Blumpsville to help with a fire, and they're gonna do fireground on north, they just click over and still talking. And all the Homeland Security frequencies. And then we're adding a talk group for Blenny MS, and then for future use, in case we ever have a need, a Board of Education, a County Board of Education, a City Board of Education, a Utilities frequency, and a couple others. I forget what the others were, but we are building in room for expansion. That way all the radios don't have to be touched again if we decide to use those talk groups 2 or 3 years down the road.
And there's not a cost for these. These are just programming.
It's just much easier to build them out on the initial push than to have to go back and redo.
On those TAC channels, is there a way to scan those TAC channels? Like if we're on TAC 1, like if everybody's talking on TAC 1, and my
Yes.
department switches over to our private channel, can we still hear what's going on TAC 1? Okay.
Y'all's radios will scan, and the TAC channels are also encrypted.
It means no scanner land.
There's very slim chance of Scannerland getting on any of these because of the way they are trunked to begin with, but yes. One of the questions as
My
we said-
grandmother will be rolling over in her grave.
Look, we got a little while before we get there. So Scannerland will still be on as long as we're patched. One of the conversations after the association meeting was talking about helicopter EMS and how do we talk to the helicopters. We got 2 options with that. We can do a linked, kind of like the patches that we're doing, to the VHF VMed channel that the helicopter's currently using. Or most of the helicopters have the option of doing a frequency that's one of the interops, it's 7 TAC 56, that most of the helicopters already have also. So we've got 2 options there, so we're not gonna be blocked out from talking to the helicopters. Far as fire department dispatch goes, on most everybody's radios now, they have a night page, which is a specific channel that they turn to that makes their tones go active. On the new radios, it is a voice mute button. And you hit the voice mute, and then until your tone comes out, the channel doesn't open. And these radios will do multiple tone sets, so we can have a all-county alert tone. So if we needed to give out a critical message, or a maintenance message, or anything that we needed everybody to hear, we can do an all-tone and open every radio in the county. We could also set up regional tones, so if we had a large-scale event, a plane crash, a bus wreck, something, one tone would hit everybody in the north region. And then the department specific, so it gives us a lot of capability with notifications that we don't currently have. Third thing is, I guess it's the 4th thing, I went in a strange order on my list here. The unification pagers. These are very similar to the Motorola Minotaur type pagers that a lot of our fire departments use for their tone alerts. These are neat little devices that give a lot of ability without having talkback. You can program multiple tone sets in them. I think they'll do like 80 different pre-planned tones. So somebody that responds with a couple of departments could have these programs with all the departments. These do not affiliate with the air system though. They would be assigned specifically to our 2 towers. So if you take off and go to Gadsden, Huntsville, Birmingham, and expect your pager to alert you that your fire department got a tone, they're not gonna do that. Which makes sense, because if you're in one of those towns, you're not gonna be able to respond back to something anyway. Since they are not system affiliated, I do not feel that there would be any user fee associated to them, because each department would be responsible for owning and maintaining these. We would be completely hands-off on them. So it's just
But they would still have to go would they still have to come through 911 in order to get the programming and encryption to program those?
Not through us, they would have to go through Motorola.
Motorola.
So at the point of purchase, they would say, I want this device set up to do this, this, and this, and they would set it up and push it in, and then that'd be done. So it would be a point of purchase programming. There is also a programming software that the departments could buy for these. So once they had their tower affiliations set up in the programming, they could program these on their own if they wanted to buy the software and do that. So those seem to be a decent option. They're gonna be probably in the $700 range. When you can buy one of the Apex 900s from us for $900 while we've got them, buying radios is probably a better deal. But down the road, $700 with no system fees may be a good option for some departments to be able to get those.
And that was one of the things, when we attended, the Fire Association meeting to try to answer some questions, that was one of the questions that they brought up is, was there a Minotaur option? And so, have you sent the email out yet as far as that Minotaur option?
I've not, because I was waiting on
We'll try to get
on
that out to
pricing.
you.
They are researching to see how many devices we would have to buy if we wanted to do an association bulk order. How many do we have to classify as a bulk order to be able to drive that price point down some? So I'm hoping to have that in the next few days.
All right.
And we should hopefully have some timeline on the patch equipment being established in the next week or so. They're waiting on some equipment shipping. Once the equipment is all in-house at Motorola in Birmingham, then we'll be able to establish a timeline for getting that patch up and going and allowing the folks that already have radios to start listening and seeing what they've got.
Okay. Any other comments on the P25?
Oh, there is one other thing. In your package, you've got a draft of a membership contract. That's just a first run. Y'all kind of look over that, give me some input on if you think there needs to be anything else. That is just a draft. That's not anything that we have to take action on. But that's kind of my first draft of getting something on paper as to how we're gonna do those. Now,
Okay. All right. That brings us down to the next item, the system administrative applicant review.
email those resumes out, I think it was first of last week. We had a total of 11. I sent you 8 of them because 2 of them were from New York State, and I feel pretty certain that they thought they were applying for something that was in Aniana, New York, not Aniana, Alabama. I don't think that our pay scale warrants anybody wanting to move from New York State to here. So I culled those on the first run just to eliminate any confusion. So you've got 8 resumes that I sent, and I'm just looking for some guidance as to how y'all want to proceed from there. We want to do an in-meeting review, or we've already done one committee, but if we wanted to do another committee, or if we wanted to pick the top 3, or what's everybody's opinion?
Church.
I know.
You said we've already done one committee?
We established a contract review committee earlier.
Oh, okay. I really don't think, I think we ought to discuss, if we're gonna discuss the individual applicants, we ought to do that in our executive session.
You wanna review the applications, and then you all wanna have can we go to a work session, or executive session and a work session to
Yeah.
review these?
If notice is sent out, just like a regular meeting, notice, yeah.
Would it be the pleasure of the board to have a work session to discuss these and review the applications?
Yes.
Okay. Do y'all have a
posted 3 weeks.
3 days? 48 or 72?
I think it's 48
40
hours.
hours.
Yeah, I think 48 hours is all it is.
Tuesday, 26th?
I can't do it on the 26th. We've got a drive-through COVID
Yeah.
thing going on. And then I will be out of town.
About Monday, the 25th?
That's payroll day, but we can make it work.
Gonna have to be after lunch for me.
That's even better.
2 o'clock, January 25th?
Works for me.
All right. All right, we're gonna set a work session for 2 o'clock, Monday the 25th, for the purpose of system application review. We will be in executive session for that, so. All right. Any other comments on the system admin review? All right, discuss and establishing a plan review for updating dispatch fees.
As we talked back in the fall, we need to do some work on trying to get some balance in the way the dispatch fees are done. The original calculation for those was done a way long time ago, and we have outpaced our percentage increases, as well as we've kind of gotten more and more disparaging of the rates. So we need to come up with some way to kind of balance those out and see where we're gonna go going forward. My hope would be to be able to publish these by April or so, to give our powers that be in other agencies time to adapt and make their preparations budget-wise. So I just need to, again, I'm looking for guidance as to how y'all wanna do this. Want me to bring it back as something for the February meeting, or do we want to, how y'all wanna do that? It's gonna be a fairly lengthy conversation, appropriately.
Can we address that at the same time, work session next week? Would you be prepared by then, or?
I was gonna say, would you,
I
we'll
can
put
make
it
it
off.
happen.
what if we,
If we wanted to do it in that work session and then go into executive session, I can make that happen.
you'll be able to get everything together by then?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, we can certainly put it on there
That's
for
what I'm saying,
discussion.
you know, for
Yeah, we
don't- we like
discussion,
to
then
take-
kinda
yeah,
get it rolling.
Yeah, to begin the conversation.
I'm not saying that's decisions, of course, it's
Yeah.
a work session anyway, but, at least it gets some discussion going and gets kind of some guidelines.
That's much better than having two completely separate meetings everybody's gotta come back
Yeah.
to, so I'll
Add
make
to
that
the-
happen.
We'll add that to the agenda on that work session. All right. Any other comments on dispatch fees? Brings us down to new business, approval to open a bank account for the P25 system.
The hope would be to try to, as much as possible, keep the money for our new radio system and our general operating money separated. Technically, we could do that on paper, but it's much easier in two completely separate accounts to be able to see what's what. So my request would be to open a new account for the sole purpose of the fees associated with the new radio system. That way we've got a very distinguished, different pool of money for the dispatch, the radio systems fees to be paid into, and our contractual obligation to Motorola be paid out of. So that would be the purpose of that bank account. It would be,
Are we gonna also put money into that account, for instance, that comes in for other things, like Mark mentioned the fact of getting contributions to help offset cost?
correct, anything related to the new radio system would go into that account. So that the 911 operations account sustains 911 operations. The new bank account would sustain just the radio system operations and keep them in two totally separate pots. That's a lot cleaner way for Heidi and I to be able to keep up and report back on the financial status of the radio system, because they're in two completely different accounts.
Do we not, does the accounting program not have the general ledger accounts and everything that you can just, I mean, with that, you ought to be able to do it all. I don't understand where it would be easy. I understand you can see it easier, understand that. I'm just not sure the hassle of going through and opening another account and stuff like that.
That's similar to the way that we did the donation account for the drone project,
Yeah.
because technically, the drone project is not technically attached to the 911 funds. And the radio system, in my mind, is very similar to that. Technically, it's not 911 operations, we're just brokering a radio system for the public safety community. So, in my mind, it is kind of a separate thing from our operations account to segment it out and distinguish it that way. It is a little bit of hassle to get that account open and going, but Hometown Bank has agreed to go ahead and get us the paperwork started. So we've got that paperwork here and ready if y'all choose to go that route. That gives us a clean break. If anybody questions going down the road of if the 911 board is making money off of the radio system, no, we're not. We've got that segmented out in a totally separate account, doing its own thing.
Yeah, that's gonna be easier about auditing and all that.
Absolutely.
What's gonna happen when we have to take money out of 911 to supplement expenses for that thing, paying for it?
We own the bank account. We'll just push money
So
over.
we will, but we will show that somewhere.
Correct. Yeah, 911 will be doing a monthly contribution to that account.
All right. What would be the pleasure of the board on that account?
I'll put it as a motion to open the bank account.
Have a motion?
Second.
I'll second.
Read off the signatory.
And the signers on the current account are Brandon, Dean, Bob, myself and Heidi, Mark, Ken, and Steve Gunn. Is that the same signers that y'all wanna put on the new account? That way all of our signers match on the accounts.
I think we need to keep, personally, I think we need to keep it consistent.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Okay. If those signers that I read out will sign that paperwork Heidi's got after a while, Steve can reach through the phone and take care of that, and we'll get that up and going. The other conversation with that is what amount of money do y'all wanna put in that account to begin that account?
To open that account?
How do we want to establish that account and the 911 contributions to that account?
Well, aren't we going to have a bill here that we're doing stuff for dispatch, like $10,000, already going to just $225?
Correct. We will have a bill for the patch equipment some point in the future, not too distant future, hopefully.
Back last year when we started talking about maybe going to this P25 system, we have been paying down on the note for the building, the additional principal on the note of the building. Can we use some of that money that we've been paying on the additional principal to kind of work towards that and have a set amount to go in there? Or I'm not saying have to take, I mean,
The worksheet that I presented as a draft for the way we would pay things had us putting $6,000 a month out of 911 funds to towards that debt payment.
Okay.
So we wanna put $6,000 a month into that account, just as a standard.
And where was that 6,000 coming from as far as,
It was just coming out of the operations account. So if we're gonna do that, we do need to either completely delete that extra payment or drastically reduce that extra payment.
And
Not to be depleted
that
too
loan's
quickly.
at 3.55%, something like that,
The building loan,
yeah.
I think that's right.
I think
Think
it was
that's
at
right.
3.
I think it's
So
3.5.
we're gonna, I missed it, but
I'm not saying stop it, but if we can, I'm just trying to move money to try to build an account.
And then at some point by summer, if we,
well, why do we need it in there right now?
at some point by summer, we will have to make that first down payment that they deferred. So,
Of the $250,000?
Correct. so if we're still looking, trying to find any state money or anything else that will assist with that. Sorry, I'm looking up the interest rate.
So I see no benefit in taking money out of one account and putting it in the other right now. We're not gonna need it for the summer. If we watch our expenses, it's the same thing,
And then just.
and not have to go the extra red tape.
That just gets us the account up and ready so that as soon as that patch is in place and we start assigning users, we've got a place to put that first set of user fees.
How much is the patch gonna do?
I would have to pull that quote back
They
out.
said, he said around 10,000.
That's what I was thinking.
It'd be more than that.
Building loan rate is 3.25,
2.5, okay.
678 left on it.
I'm still a firm believer that the sooner we can pay it down, the more we got to do this other with. And that's at interest rate, at what interest rate? 2.55,
255 is,
that's nearly 1%. It's half a percent cheaper. So for me, I'd rather put the money on paying the interest, the higher interest down,
Get that down.
get that down, and pay it as hard as long as we can. Now, we're going to do something down the road, but I don't see doing nothing right now. Since we ain't got no payments to make or building an account, it's not going, we can always transfer the money in a day's time.
We're gonna have to have, we're gonna have to have some set amount though to get that account
Correct.
started.
So,
It'd be
so can we do it?
$100 or more.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
$1,000 or something.
If we just do a one-time transfer of $1,000 just to get that account established, would that be okay with the board?
fine with me.
Make it the motion.
Okay, Ken made a motion to make a transfer.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that brings us down to the surplus of VHF radios.
Our new District 2 commissioner had approached me about wanting to put radios back in their vehicles so that they could talk to us for weather events and things like that. He was talking about buying new radios, being that we are making the motions towards a new radio system. I would hate for him to buy new radios when we have stuff sitting on the shelf that we can surplus. So this is a request to surplus 2, possibly 4 of our old VHF radios. If you remember, I guess 2 years ago, as we started the leads process, we replaced our old radios in the rack with new Moto Turbo radios when we thought we were going that route. So everything in the rack is Moto Turbo capable, which gave us 6 older style VHF radios that are sitting back there as spares, but we've got an overabundance of spare equipment back there, so we need to start cleaning the house a little bit. So I would like to be able to sell District 2 Commission 2, possibly 4, if he decides he wants 4 of those old VHF radios.
Got a price, what,
I don't know,
I checked them online, you know.
100 apiece or something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, they're just collecting dust on our side, so get a little
I
bit out
don't-
of them and send them on.
I don't know that it's worth the accounting again, if we can't just transfer them or donate them, declare them surplus and donate them to them, can't we?
whatever y'all
I
want.
mean, for I'm not saying $100, but for the
That's what I'd say.
District Two, let's just
Just
give them to
surplus them and donate them.
Surplus.
They gotta be responsible for installing and the programming and all that, cause that needs to be,
So entertain a motion to surplus those listed items to District Two. Have that in form of a motion.
so moved. Go ahead,
I'll make that one.
Okay.
I'll second. I'd like to make sure we have those radios deprogrammed or programmed without all the others in it before they leave here. Do you have that capability?
No, without paying a desk charge
Yeah.
to Motorola,
Get me the model number.
CDM 1550s.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. That brings us down to the next agenda item. Chief Chris Hill, President of the Blount County Fire Protection Association, would like to address the board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I'd like to say that we are excited about the Peachman Fire System. Even though we've had a lot of questions, we are excited. I've been in the fire department since 1991, so I've been around for a while. And when Max was here, I've got a bumper at my house that came off a Jeep. It's got a sticker on it that says, "We need enhanced 911." So I've been here for a minute, so don't think that I'm some new guy coming in and trying to ask you guys to make changes or whatever. I do have some questions that have been brought to me by members of the Fire Association, by the chiefs. We're 23 agencies, 22 volunteer agencies, and the rescue squad. Of those, we've got Aniana, this career department, and West Blunt just made the transition to a combination department. So, anyway, we've got some questions that we want answered. I know that Brandon and Steve and Neil were at the last association meeting. I don't think I missed anybody. Indeed. What is it? It was in his department, so. Anyway, we asked some questions, but I want to come here and get some official answers, and then at the end, I would like to make a proposal to you, and see if we can all work together. First of all, we are curious as to what the total cost of the system is. If we can, we've got different numbers.
Finance amounts 2.4 million.
2.4 million, okay?
That's everything? I thought it was 3 something with all the new radios.
2.4.
2.4?
2.4 is what we signed, and that has the ability to get a new amortization schedule if we can go above that 250 down payment.
Okay, so next question, what is the yearly payment on the system?
$276,000, I believe. I don't have that sheet in front of me.
And then, so for how many year term is that?
It's a 10-year term, first 2 years deferred.
10 year, 2 years deferred.
So calendar-wise, it looks like 12, because the first 2 years, we don't make any payments, and that's zero interest on those deferred years.
Okay, so what's the break-even point on users on the system to make that $276,000 payment?
It depends on the mix of user fees only versus rented radios versus sold radios, somewhere in the ballpark of 250 users.
So let me ask this question on top of that. What if the fire association takes 0 radios?
Fire Association not using,
No. So what if, because in this, we're looking at grants, and so let's say, because we're looking at doing a regional grant for Blount County on AFG. And if we do a regional grant, that would give every fire department in this county all the radios they need. So how would that affect the payment on the system if we did not lease any radios from the 911 board?
do you buy the radios at a discounted price from us?
No, because these are fire-rated radios. These
So-
will be Apex 4000s that are actually a fire-rated
They
radio.
still have the $20 a month
They're-
user fee.
So, these are radios that are $2,700 a piece, is what FEMA will pay. So my question is, if we I know you've contracted for X number of radios, and I'm kinda getting ahead of myself a little bit. But speaking to the chiefs in the county, about half the fire departments aren't gonna go P25, cause they can't afford it. And then the ones that are looking at only getting 5 or 6 radios, maybe 8 radios at the most. So, you know, my question is, if 250 is the break-even point, is law enforcement meeting that 250? Are you close? Because,
I've got commitments for 100 and, what was on that spreadsheet, anybody remember, 170, 180?
Yeah, 180.
okay, 180 committed. Okay.
But that is including 40-ish fire department radios.
Okay, so I'm gonna, that's my car, sorry. I'm gonna give you, first of all, of these 23, entities in the county, Pine Mountain has a fire district with limited, fire use that have been locked in for about 10 or 12 years. Rim Lab has a fire district that has been locked in for several years. That amount can't be raised. West Blunt just recently formed a fire district. Would you like a copy, Chief? So I would like everyone to take a moment to find, I'm assuming everybody in here but Chief from Leeds lives in Blount County. So if you will find your fire department on the left side, and then you'll look over on the right side and see what your fire department's yearly budget is. Now, Chief Pass is sitting here, is that right, Chief?
Yes.
That's the information you gave me? So, when you look at the yearly budget for these fire departments, if you look at that left column, you can see how many mobile radios each fire department has. And that signifies how many apparatus they have. So, you can see that Holly Springs has got 5 fire trucks. And Straight Mountain's got 7, and Summit's got 7, and Susan Moore's got 5, and Nectar's got 5. And Aniana has got 5. I can promise you my insurance on my 5 trucks costs me almost as much as Aniana's. And Cleveland's and Pine Mountains and so on and so forth. So when we go down there and we look at that yearly budget for Holly Springs, and I brought in $42,000 last year. $8,000 of that went to insurance on my trucks and my building right off the bat. And then by the time I got my utilities, I've got another $4,000 to $5,000 for water bill and power bill and phone bill and things like that. I'm locked in, guys. I'm sitting at the point that it's like squeezing a turnip. And I know some of these other departments, look at Rosa. If you look at Rosa, $20,000 a year budget. You look at Royal, 23.5. Ricetown, 16,000 is what they're getting from their community. Now, I know that we've got to fund this system, but we're bled dry, guys. We're to the point that we can't pay anything else out. And I've called around, I've called surrounding 911 districts. I spoke with Marshall County, they're charging $10 user fee. I spoke with Etowah County, they're charging a $10 user fee. Jefferson County, the guy laughed and he said, I live in Blount County, I know y'all don't have any money. I spoke with Coleman County, they're not charging a user fee. Shelby County actually, now I know they're a little richer than we are, but they called every fire department and said, how many trucks and how many personnel do you have? And they gave them the radios. Now, I can't expect y'all to do that, but we are asking you to work with us on the user fee. So I'm gonna go on down. We have an opportunity. I've applied for a grant for SCBA's because my SCBA's were built in 1997. That's life safety. That's something I have to get replaced. And it's gonna cost me about $12,000 match on that grant if I get it, so I'm gonna have to actually borrow the money from the bank to pay that match. But when I called the grant writer, she said, hey, several fire departments in Blount County have submitted grant paperwork this year. y'all need to apply for radios. And I told her, I said, ma'am, I said, you can give me radios, I can't afford to use them. And she said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, our 911 board has said that they want to charge the institute a $20 per month per device fee. And if you look at Holly Springs, I've got 5 trucks. Right now, I've got 20 handheld radios. That would be 25. That would cost me $6,000 a year in user fees. That's not counting me releasing the radios if I decided to go lease. That's just my user fee. If you give me radios, look at Locust Fort. Locust Fort got 20 radios on the Homeland Security grant. When he got the letter from Neil, he called me and he said, hey man, these may be paperweights. I don't know that I've got $4,800 to pay the user fee on these radios. I'm gonna have to look at my budget. So I think where we're coming from is we were never really aware over all this time that we were discussing this, we were never told. And I've been at every association meeting, you can go back and look at the records, but one in the last about 8 years. And we've never once, until that letter came out from Neil, have been told there would be a user fee. We couldn't.
Yeah, I think you were, because when the communications committee was meeting 3 years ago, that was the reason we did not pull the trigger on P25 then and explored the turbo, because we knew that nobody could afford the user fee that would have to be attached.
So what's changed in 3 years?
The fact that we had to move forward.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, from the volunteer fire department standpoint, my budget's gonna be the same 5 years from now, or 7 years from now. So, what we're looking at was this AFG grant. We can do what's called a regional grant. When you do a regional grant, that's where everybody in the county applies. And then you've got a much better chance of getting your grant when you do a regional grant. And if she writes that, she would write it for every fire department in Blount County to receive radios based on apparatus and seating positions. So for Aniana, 5 apparatus. There's 4 seating positions considered on each truck. So on that grant, he would get 5 mobiles and 20 handhelds. Holly Springs would get the same thing. Pine Mountain, based on their numbers, would get for 8 trucks, because he's got 2 stations. So he has to have more trucks to make the requirement for ISO. Straight Mountain has got 7 trucks and 2 stations, because they have 3,000 households. So for 7 trucks, Straight Mountain would receive 7 times 4, 28 handhelds on this grant, plus the 7 truck radios. But the limiting factor for us applying for this grant is that most of the fire departments on here, I've marked Allgood, the Rescue Squad, Blountsville, Brooksville, Dallas, Selfville, Holly Springs, Mount High, Murphys Valley, Ricetown, Rosa, Royal, Summit, and Susanmore have all said they can't pay that user fee. So if we could somehow, for the volunteer fire departments, reduce that user fee, we could get fire-rated digital radios on a grant. Chief Gunn, the other night, told me at the association meeting, he told everybody, you there, Chief?
Yeah.
He said, you need to apply for this AFG grant. I've already been told that I can get it endorsed by our senator if you will apply for it. We want to apply for it.
Is there a match on that regional grant?
It would be 5%. So what we've discussed, I've already spoken with Chief Booth at Aniana, and well, there's 2 ways we can do it, Chief. Either, number 1, we can do a regional grant for the entire county, and it would be a 10% match because we have more than 50% population, more than 50,000. Or we can divide it up, and West Blount could sponsor departments on that side of the county, Aniana could sponsor departments on this side of the county, Pine Mountain we can divide it up to where we had regions in the county and do like 3 grants to get it below that 50,000, and it would be a 5% match. So, with the 5% match, I can tell you right now with my SCBA's, I'm gonna go to the bank and borrow the money for my match. So if I got the radios, then I would just add my 5% to that, and that's what. And I've talked to other chiefs, and that's the same thing that they're talking about doing. You know, when you write those grants, you keep a little money in reserve, so if you get the grant, you got the money to pay your match. I can say those Motorola, the Apex 900s, we've looked at them. They're a public service radio. I know you have negotiated a good price on them, but they're really designed for waterworks and utilities board. They're not designed for the fire service. As far as robust, as far as the same specs, the button sizes, the Apex 4000s, which are the radios we would get on this grant, are $2,700 a piece. And they are a fire-rated radio that would hold up, okay? Okay, now, so here's our proposal. Either a flat fee for the volunteer fire departments, something that we could afford. Because if you look, I've marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of the 23 that says they can't afford anything right now. If they can't afford to go all in. So you're only gonna get user fees from about 12 departments anyway. So if you would reduce that user fee to something that was affordable for everybody, then we could bring everybody on board. And if we could bring everybody on board, we could do away with the patch. If we can do away with the patch, we can get full, how you say it now?
Get rid of the blade over.
You can get rid of the bleed over. So, you know, what I'm looking at, right now, the user fees based on the number of radios that we have in the county now would be $105,000. And I did not count, and then when you look at that budget, I didn't count Oneonta or West Blunt because they're paid, okay? The user fees right now will be $105,000 that the fire departments were paying in. If we get this grant, you're gonna look at about 500 handhelds in the county. Because it's one per seating position on the apparatus. So that would even be more. And we can't afford that. When you look at our budgets, $800,000 a year budget, you're talking about taking 12% of that for user fees. But if we could reduce that to a set amount, and you could get all the departments on board, because, you know, when you look at Rosa, they got a $20,000 budget, but they got as many trucks as Oneonta does, because they're required to have that many trucks. Same thing for Cleveland, is that right, Chief? I see you shaking your head. So, you know, I'm not here saying, give it to us for free. But I know that I can't afford $6,000 a year in user fees. I know 1,000, 1,500. If we did a set, flat rate that we could budget, and you know, in the volunteer fire departments, you have guys go in and out. You have, when the economy goes down, guess what happens to the fire dues I collect? They go down because people pay them voluntarily. The economy gets better, they might go up a little bit, but we're limited. We don't have the funds, okay? So my proposal to the 911 board, and I'm not asking you to make a decision today, but this grant cycle ends February 15th. So we have to have the grant submitted before February 15th. And for about half the departments on this list, whether we get this fee reduced will determine whether or not we apply for the grant. If we can get it reduced, Holly Springs will apply for radios. If we can't get it reduced, we won't. We'll just stay on the old system. Now, you might say, well, why don't you just apply for less radios? Well, if we only apply for, say, 8, then that's our only opportunity. We're not gonna be able to go back in 5 years and apply for more. Because once they have funded something, once AFG has funded something, they won't fund it again. So, it's not something that we can apply for a few this year and then go back and apply for a few next year and a few the next year. Anyone have any questions?
On your other districts that you polled, did you talk about ownership of their system?
As in who owned it?
Yes. where their front money came from?
I did, and I understand, you know, I talked with a guy from Jefferson County for about 2 hours. You know, and I know that they have more money than we have. We understand that.
My point was, the other systems are not owned by the 911 board as ours is.
Yeah, but if you,
Their county commissions put up almost all, if not all, and we don't have that opportunity here.
if you remember, that's the reason I voted against the proposal, because we come out when we approved this and shot it out there, only the top thing. I wanted all along, no radios, because I said, this is gonna happen. And if we'd have come out with that, we could have had a more reduced rate, my opinion. But I doubt if we can make any changes in the contract now.
And our issue is, you know, user fees, if I get the radios for free, I sure can't afford $35 a month to rent a radio. So we're gonna have to stay VHF. Now, if we can go to get a grant, like the Homeland Security grant or the AFG grant or whatever, wherever we can get the grant, it's actually the user fees dictating me applying for a grant and trying to improve our radio service, and it's dictating for a lot of departments. I talked to Chief Fry, Tim Fry Jr. sent me an email, and he said, I don't know about you, but I can't afford this. And you know, they're one of the departments that's really having a lot of communication issues. So, you know, and they don't have a lot of, you know, when you look at Rosstown, their budget's $16,000 a year. So,
I think, personally, I think we understand your budgets and all the numbers.
Yeah.
I do have a question on the grant. Is that grant only good for portables?
it's mobiles and portables.
Just mobiles and portables?
Mobile-
Couldn't
now-
include any backbone equipment?
Okay, so,
That was gonna be my next comment, is if you can apply, here, that $20 user fee is based on us being able to pay off the infrastructure that we had to buy to make this radio system go up. So,
Yes.
if inside those grants can be included some of these components of the infrastructure, which takes off a balance off the front, again, what we have financed can be, re-amortized, so that if some of these things are within those grants are awarded up front and we pay those off, that fee does come down.
So
Or if we get contributions between now and the 2 years, those user fees would come down in order to reduce those fees.
I can't say that when AFG specifies grant writing, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, because St. Clair County did a grant years ago, and they actually went motor turbo, and they got an AFG grant. So when you apply for AFG grants, you apply for an infrastructure grant, or you apply for a equipment grant. So, those would be two separate things. We could have applied for a grant to do P25. The county could have. Now, what you have to do is have a fire department in the county, because that's why I said Chief said he would sponsor it. AFG will not let an entity apply. It has to be sponsored by a fire department. So back when St. Clair County did their system years ago, and they went motor turbo, they actually, Moody Fire Department sponsored the grant. Am I correct, Chief?
I believe that's right.
Moody sponsored the grant, and then they got it and they went motor turbo, and they didn't realize that motor turbo would not meet the P25 specs, so now they're sitting here in a conundrum. And I've spoken with Richard Harvey about 4 or 5 times about this. And Richard said that they're trying to figure out how they're gonna fund it in St. Clair County, because they know that the volunteer fire departments won't have the money to pay something like a user fee. So, I don't think there's any of that grant. It's just an equipment grant that would, basically, when you write an AFG grant, you can write an apparatus grant, you can write a grant for equipment. And when you write you can write a training grant, there's different categories. But when you write an equipment grant for radios, because like Aniana, I think they're applying for a grant, right, Chief? And you're gonna apply for radios too, correct? You're not? But if we go regional, you're gonna apply for radios. Yes, so what dictates whether or not you apply for the radios?
My perspective on this is based on the mutual aid. If the rest of the county can't afford to come online, then it doesn't do any good to come online. Now, I think we've all agreed, no questions asked, that moving to the new system is where we need to be. But just from a interoperability perspective, if we're on the island by ourselves on P25, it doesn't do us any good.
So, that is our proposal. You can take it for what it's worth. We do appreciate the work that y'all do. It's trying to improve our communication system because it definitely needs improved. So,
Any other
So,
com-
just to backtrack, a year ago, when we first did our radio surveys and our numbers and started this process, we had the Apex 4000 spec. And that was that 3.75 million that we knew couldn't pull the trigger on. So the original plan was to do 4000s, and it was not affordable to get any reasonable, usable number of user radios out in the field.
well, I know that Joey Lay, Chief Lay at Lowe's Fort, got 20 radios and it was $48,000. So he did get the Apex 4000s because when you look at an AFG grant, they will only spec what is NFPA spec.
Correct.
So if you go to buy a thermal imager, you can buy cheaper thermal imagers, but you gotta buy the one that's NFPA. You can't buy the one that's just below it, that's just as good, that doesn't have those 4 letters. It's the same way with radios. So, anybody that gets the AFG grant, it will be for the Motorola, the Apex 4000s, and whatever the number is on the truck radio, the mobile radios in the truck. So,
Well, maybe over the next couple of weeks, we can look at if, at least user fees or grant opportunities to be able to reduce that number. We'll try to work with you, and see if we can get that, hopefully.
As you're talking to everybody all the chiefs in the county and you want to reduce, user fee, I personally like to have one for nothing, but what is everybody's number that they want reduced to?
well, so what I was looking at is I looked at the number of departments that said that they were gonna come on board. The other night we did a roll call vote at the association. And I don't have that data in front of me, but, Chief was there. And there were a couple of departments that says, yes, we're doing it, okay? Then most of them said, yes, but a limited number of radios, 6 or 8, okay? And when I added up if we took 6 or 8 from each department and that said yes, it would be about $30,000 a year was what would be contributed in user fees. So if we could take in $1,000, $1,250 per department flat rate, that would get you at that same amount of money, but then it would allow us to apply for this grant, and it would allow everybody in the county to come over onto to digital and do away with the patch. So it's getting the same amount of money either way, in from the entities. It's just the poor kid can't play. Okay, so Aniana said they're not going to do this. Lowe's Sports told me, he said, well, I've already got the radios. They're either going to collect us or I've got to figure out a way to pay them. Straight Mountain, no, they've got a $100,000 budget, so they're going to apply for radios because they can afford it, because they got over 3,000 households. I think Pine Mountain's going to apply for a few. I talked to John. So there's some departments that have already told Cindy, yes, we want to apply for so many radios. And when she calls me, she's like, why don't we get everybody else on board? I said, well, everybody else can afford it. So that's kind of the hinging point that, at $1,000, you're looking at $23,000. At 1,500, you're looking at 30,000. I don't think that anybody could go over 1,500, because when you're looking at that, that's 10% of some of the budgets. And there's,
But you're talking about every department in the whole county paying $1,500
or 1,000, or whatever
A
the
year.
board,
a year.
a year. You know, and that would allow every department in the county the opportunity to come onto the system. Based on the survey we did the other night and me talking to chiefs, that's about all you're gonna get anyway, because the other departments just can't afford it. Personally, I'd like to stay in the 1,000 to 1,250 range, because that's seemed to be a breaking point for some of them. But, you know, like I said, that's totally up to the 911 board. And, you know, if y'all decide to stay at that $20, user fee for the volunteer fire departments, I know that there's gonna be a few that come on board, but there's gonna be a lot that don't, just because they can't afford it. I do have one other thing, that I would like to discuss, and that is, when I look at, the bylaws of the association, and I've got copies here that for everybody that's in attendance, if they would like a copy. Article 5, Section 6 says, any representative or committee member representing the association to an outside agency must attend at least one regularly scheduled meeting on a quarterly basis in the preceding year to be nominated for that position, and must provide a quarterly report back to the association on any activity. I know that Chief Sanford and Mr. Gilbert are both representatives at this time for the association. I would like to formally request that one of them make plans to attend on a quarterly basis the fire association meetings, so that we can know what's going on with the 911 board. This is something that I've taken a day off work to come to, because I think it's that important, but I can't take off every month to come. And since we do have 2 representatives that represent the Fire and EMS Association, I would just formally request that they try to make plans to come to a quarterly meeting of the association, so they can report back to us, and so there's no confusion. When, I know Neil's there, but it puts Neil in a tough spot, because Neil works for the 911 board, and then sometimes it gets a little heated when people start asking questions, and I have to remind them, guys, Neil is an employee, he's not one of the board members per se that, you know, we need to address that with. So, that, I would like to make that request also.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, that brings us down to RPSS annual maintenance contract.
This is our annual maintenance for our telephone, and the reminder, we have dropped the recorder that used to be part of this quote is now contracted out to Quality Recording Solutions. RPSS got out of recorder maintenance. So this is a little bit less than what we used to see. And my proposal would be that $3,300 on the third line for the Data Master support, that we drop that off of this quote. Data Master is the database maintenance software that maintains our Annie-Alley database for landlines. As you look up on the screen there, this is today's 911 activity. And so far we have had 3 landline calls to date. We have paid that $3,300 the last 2 years and have not made a support call to Data Master in 2 years. So my thought is, in the long run, if we needed a support call, it would be much cheaper to just pay the one time than the $3,300 a year that we've been paying and not using.
What would be a support call? What do you mean? Repair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most everything that they would do would be done through a dial-in connection. If the thing were to fail, the only thing that it affects is updates done to landline users. And we're not getting any more landline users. If anything, we only are reducing the number of landlines. So I think that's $3,300 a year that we can take off of this quote. We discussed doing it last year, and left it for one more year and verified through Rachel that we did not make any use of that $3,300 last year.
Do we need a motion for that? Or a motion to pay it less that amount?
Motion to pay less than.
I'll make a motion, we pay that renewal quotation less than $3,300.
Okay, have a motion?
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah,
Any opposed? All right. Road naming complaint.
Back page of your packet. There was a decision made that predates myself and Rachel, probably close to 10 years ago, that as far as road names, we would not use any proper names going forward, no more family names. Because there tends to be in the long run, disagreement and changes that want to be made because people die off or move away. And people don't want that family name attached to their road anymore. So for quite some time, we have had the stance of we do not use family names. So the back page of your package is a letter from someone that is upset because we did not use the family name on their road. Rachel couldn't be here today, she had a family obligation, so on your seat positions there is a set of notes from Rachel referencing this with a map attached. Long story short, Mr. Lewis thinks that we should have named that after his family. He does not live there. They have property there, and he originally built that private road, but he does not live there. Does own property, but doesn't live there. And you'll see in Rachel's notes that one of the Lewises divided part of their property into 3 10-acre lots and sold them off. 2 other persons have built homes there. They were the ones that requested an address. And because there is the more than 2 addresses on that private drive, we had to assign a name to it based on our rules. So we assigned it as Sunrise Drive. And those persons have already been issued Sunrise Drive. One of those properties is for sale with the listing and the deed and everything in the sale process as Sunrise Drive. Long story short, one way or another, we're gonna upset somebody. My feel is the stance has been we don't use private names, personal names. So that's what I feel we probably need to stick with.
How long has it been this?
It predates me, so at least almost 8 years.
I make a motion, we leave it like
Sunrise
that.
does, or?
No, the decision, and I don't know if that was a board decision or a max decision not to use personal names, but the road naming plan that Rachel and I inherited was not to use personal names, and we have told multiple people as we've done their private drives that was not an option. So I think if we did change this, we were gonna set a precedent that other people would want to come back and change road names. And when you make somebody change road name, their road name, they have to change everything that's associated to their property. Bank accounts, credit cards, where their bills mail, deeds, everything has to adapt to their change of address. So just looking, a vote of the board one way or another, what to do with this letter and going forward, that we either can or cannot use private names.
You got this letter from Terry Lewis?
Yes. Yeah, there's 3 Lewis brothers that own property on that road, but none of the 3 have an address associated to them on
I
that road.
make a motion, we reemphasize our policy of no proper names on private road naming. Is that what you want?
Mhm.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion and a second to uphold our policies of no family names. Is that right? Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us down to the executive session, for the potential of legal litigation.
As we go into that, can we take like a 5 or 10 minute recess? Before then, because we've been at this an hour.
Sure. But I would need a motion to
You
go
got
into.
a motion and vote out.
Have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.